Welcome to End of Life University on YouTube. Today I'm sharing with you an audio recording of a conversation I had with Kimberly King Wise about sustainable business skills for the death positive movement. Really an important topic if we want to help death doulas and other people involved in end of life work to stay viable in their careers. So give that a listen and be sure to subscribe to this channel down below. Also, subscribe and leave a rating and review for the End of Life University podcast wherever you happen to listen. And if you're interested in offering a little support, which I hope you will be, to help keep this show and the podcast on the air, go to eoluniversity.com/support. So we'll move on with my interview with Kimberly King Wise. Hello, everyone, and welcome to End of Life University podcast, where we share real talk about life and death. I'm your host, Dr. Karen Wyatt. Thanks for being here with me today for episode number 270. I'll be sharing an interview with you on sustainable business skills for the death positive movement with Kimberly King Wise. So stay tuned for that. And I just have one announcement, which is that my next book, which is called The Journey from Ego to Soul, How to Transform Your Life When Everything Falls Apart, is going on sale November 1st. So you can check for that on all of your favorite booksellers. It should be on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and I'm trying to also get it on IndieBound, which is a place where you can support independent bookstores by buying a book online. So I will leave links for those sites so that you can figure out where to buy the book. Maybe you can pre-order it and then get a hold of the book to actually be delivered on November 1st. It'll be available as a print book, ebook, and hopefully an audiobook by November 1st, provided all my files are okay and it's accepted. So that's my exciting announcement. And we'll move on to the interview with Kimberly. And I just wanted to mention that we recorded this quite a while ago, actually before the pandemic really hit, before we were all in lockdown. So it may seem strange that we don't talk about that, but that's why, because we recorded this quite a long time ago, and then I got sidetracked with all the episodes I did that focused on COVID. So I'm finally happy to be able to bring you this information from Kimberly King Wise. As always, stay tuned after this interview, and I'll come back with a few takeaways and to say goodbye. So here we go. Today, I'm excited to welcome my first-time guest on the podcast, Kimberly King Wise. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about business and how to create a viable business in our death positive work that we're doing in the world. I think this is a really important topic for us to cover. So I'll tell you a little bit about Kimberly. She herself is a certified end-of-life doula graduate, a home funeral guide, but also a certified business manager and virtual assistant with 21 years of experience supporting coaches, trainers, and authors. So Kimberly is going to be sharing with us about her work and how it applies to the death positive movement and how we can all improve our own skills at business to make sure that we can continue to do the work that we love to do. And you can learn more about Kimberly's work at death-positivebusiness.com. So Kimberly, welcome and thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Well, it sounds to me as if you started out in business as a virtual assistant and a coach, but then ended up also getting training as an end-of-life doula. And I'm just curious about what drew you into the death positive movement.
Absolutely. You could say from the very beginning of my life, I was surrounded by death. My little sister back in 1976, she passed away from leukemia 2 weeks before she turned 4 years old. And I was 7. And my parents had to fight the county that we were living in to allow her to come home to die and not proceed with treatment. Back then, there wasn't as much known about leukemia back in 76. And there certainly was not pediatric hospice available. So my parents were cutting edge in the quote unquote death positive movement within our own family. And that had a huge impact on me. And then over the years, my mother was a very dedicated hospice volunteer and did a lot of vigil work and would come home and talk with me about it. And I was always, in junior high and that kind of thing, and at home with family, I was always the weird girl that didn't mind talking about death. Or if I heard somebody was, on hospice in the neighborhood or something like that, I was there visiting and trying to see how I could help the family. So I very much have felt like it was a calling from a very young age. And then I was, just making my money. I hadn't really heard about anything death positive, and I was, became a certified online business manager and a virtual assistant, making money to support 4 kids. But I was always that person that people would find in the community to come to help support them through the death process. I don't know how else to say it. It's just, it's very natural for me. And then my sister found a death doula, end of life doula course. And that was Deanna Cochran's many years ago, several years ago. And I was following her. And I'm like, you know what, if this really, and then I saw more and more end of life doula courses, and then the home funeral stuff started coming out more and coming into my search engine searches. And I'm like, wow, like this is really beginning to take off. This is really like, there's a lot of education happening out in our society. And I was very, very excited about that. So I got certified with Deanna and also with the NPEC certification, and dove into the home funeral side of things, and realized that there's a gap in where people are. They're getting these certifications, which is wonderful and needed. But yet, what some people are missing is the education around just basic business building principles. And I have so much information on that, and knowledge and experience in implementing and kickstarting businesses, that I'm like, you know what, I can marry these two loves of mine, business and my end of life passion, and help these doulas and home funeral celebrants start to gain more traction in their communities as far as building a business and what it takes to do that.
It sounds like you're just so perfectly suited for this work, as you said, with your two loves that have now come together. And in my experience, there's a great need for it. I feel like the end of life doula movement and the home funeral guide movement, those are exploding right now, but there still is not a very viable path to make a career out of either any of those types of work for people.
Right. And I think some of that, not everything, some of it comes in the side of determining practice development. How are you going to manifest your practice? What services are you going to offer? And actually being able to articulate that well. And then there's the other side of it, which is a lot of end of life doulas or home funeral celebrants or guides have not necessarily owned their own business before. A lot have, but there is a huge population out there that haven't. And so making the mindset shift from being an employee to being an entrepreneur is huge. And that's where a lot of mindset type of work needs to be done. So as much as they're learning the way of the doula or the way of the home funeral celebrant, and they're learning the practical business steps to take, the bookkeeping, the websites, the social media and all that stuff. What bridges the two is that shift from employee to entrepreneur. And without that, it is much more difficult to create a viable, sustainable way to make a living.
Hmm. I
let
think
alone
that,
the fact that we're still needing to educate our society more on it. We live in a death-phobic society, and that's a whole nother, that's where so much education has to come in right now. But just the practical education of the doulas and the home funeral celebrants, there's a mindset shift that needs to happen.
and I think also, I mean, at least this has been a factor for me because I myself really struggle in this arena with the idea of business, of doing business and charging money for the things that I do. It's been an issue all along for me. And I think it has to do with caring for the dying. It feels to me like it's very spiritual work that I do. And so part of me just questions, well, is it right for me to charge people when I'm doing something that's spiritual or sacred? Like, how do I bring those together? And so it's been a big stumbling block for me. And I'm sure it probably is for other people out there too.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I do hear that a lot. And in a lot of the networking online that I've done, I definitely have come to the conclusion in the last 6 to 9 months or so that there's like three camps on that subject. There are those that believe very deeply in their spirit and in their bodies that charging for this type of work is absolutely not the thing to do, and I honor them. That is very much in alignment with their calling in their life. And who am I to say whether they're wrong or not? I don't, it's not for me to judge. And then there's the camp in the middle of the people there's a part of them that doesn't feel bad about it because they understand that it's okay to make a living doing something that you love and feel called to do. It Money makes the world go round. You need money to keep a roof over your head and food in your belly. How good are you going to be able to serve people if your basic needs aren't being met? And even enough of your needs to be met to have a really great self-care regimen, to be able to take a vacation to decompress from dealing with death and the sorrow that we deal with. So there's that camp that's in the middle that's trying to figure it out. They're waffling in it. And then there's the other side, the third camp, which is like, yep, I can make money. I have no issue with it. And that's what we need to do to really get this thing moving. That's what we need to do. So it's like there's these three camps. And I call on people to follow their heart, in how they believe they want to manifest their services in the world. If you find yourself waffling, then I would definitely work with a coach on helping you to pull apart that ball of yarn so that you can start seeing the different aspects of it and do the inner work to find out which way you're going to go. And even then, I also believe that there's a nice middle ground that people can have where sliding scale, where you don't have to be the go for it. I'm going to make, $100,000 a year or $200,000 a year in this business, because that might not necessarily happen. But yet you don't have to forego charging or just doing it from your heart space and not charging. There's a middle ground in there somewhere. And I think if we can all just kind of sit with it and get some coaching around it, we'll all be able to make the decision that's right for us.
And I like the point you're making that each one of us has been called to this work in a different way, in our own unique way. It's a part of our own life path, and it serves us, and we serve our path in whatever ways are appropriate for us. So we can't really judge another person who makes a different choice on their path. That's purely about them and what's right for them. We have to figure out our own path and find out what works for us. And I think for me, I'm definitely in that middle camp. I'm definitely someone
Mm-hmm.
who waffles. And I had the luxury, for many years of being a paid medical director for a hospice. The hospice paid me, the patients didn't. So I never had to deal with any guilt of feeling like I'm charging a patient or a family for what I'm doing. I got my paycheck from the hospice, and they were a corporation, they were a business. They figured out how to collect the money from Medicare or insurance companies, and they paid me. I was totally comfortable. That's the employee model. I was totally comfortable
Mm-hmm.
as an employee, and I never felt guilty about getting paid for the work I did because I knew how valuable it was, and I also knew the only way I could do it full time and continue to do it was to be paid for it. So yeah, as you were saying, that employee model fit really well, and I had no guilt or difficulty with it. It's been though since I've been trying to do some things on my own that I myself have really struggled with these questions of, oh, I don't know, how do I charge for this, and how much would I charge, and is it okay to charge? So I'm one of those people who probably needs coaching from you about that.
Right. And I hear what you're saying very clearly about the employee mindset part of it. It does feel different when you're the one invoicing, or you're the one accepting a payment from a family, or having that money discussion, which can be full of shame. Um, I think what I would suggest too, though, is do some work for you, do some work around the fact that get very clear that while you weren't directly getting paid by the client, you still were getting paid by the patients, whether it was their insurance or Medicare. I know there's a little bit of a difference because most of the doula work and the home funeral work is paid directly by the family or the patient, the client, to you. But really, money is just a vehicle. And if you're serving them and they are feeling served on a deep level, they're going to want, I'm very much a believer in not accruing karmic debt. And you can say that in any way, shape, or form that might fit with your paradigm in life and that. But to allow somebody to give what they can, whether it's an in-kind contribution or whether you offer a sliding scale, there's a way to be able to accept that payment from them so that they aren't incurring a karmic debt with you, that you gave something for free without some kind of opportunity to honor your time and your knowledge, some kind of compensation for that.
Hmm.
And whether it's a feather, whether it's a beautiful flower bouquet, whether it's a check for $1,000, whether it's a sliding scale and you just charge, $10 an hour while you're there. I mean, you can find a way that you can move past that shame or that feeling of not deserving, even though it's spiritual, and find a place that can really hold that space for you to still be able to, pay your bills and create a life for yourself while still loving your clients and their families.
And that's such a good point. And tragically, I would say I have known a few people who felt passionate about doing this work, about being an end of life doula and working in this area, who ended up having to leave the work because they could not create viable income from the work they were doing, and they needed to support themselves and their family, and they ended up having to leave the work. And so that tells us, I think, right there, that this is a problem. It's something we really do need to address, because we don't want people with passion to feel turned away, and that there's not a spot for them here in this end of life field that we're talking about.
Absolutely. I agree. And I know quite a few people that have had to do the same thing. And that's why I am not of the mindset that unless you are well, my mindset is unless you're independently wealthy or can sustain yourself, like your partner works and that's enough to cover, or you've had investments from the time you were working or something. But even then, you want to budget what you're willing to spend out of that nest egg to get something up and going. I am not an advocate of, okay, I'm certified now, I'm going to drop my job. You need to work yourself out of your job. You need to get to the point where your income is 3/4 of the way replaced before you go full time into this work, unless you're independently, you have a nest egg that you can draw from. And so much of that is, again, like I said, there's a mindset shift. So if you're coming from an employee mindset because you've worked in corporate or whatever, and sometimes even another business owner, they may not have an employee mindset, but the mindset shift in working in the death positive movement, because we are a quote unquote taboo subject, we already have the deck stacked against us in a lot of ways. And what's called for is education, of continuing education, continuing talking about death, having and holding death cafes, having and holding death over dinner events, so that it's not as taboo to talk about. We really need to look at this long term and not so short term. And I think that's some of the struggles we're going through as a new industry. And we went through the same thing in the virtual assistant industry back in the late 90s. Nobody knew that we could work via the internet from our own home offices and get just as much work done as if I'm sitting in your office doing admin assistant work or whatever. So there was a huge learning curve. And now virtual assistants are used all over the place. We've got, Fiverr and Upwork, and, it exploded. But we were in a very neutral and positive industry, which was business, where with the upcoming doula industry and the home funeral industry, we're in a taboo industry and people don't want to talk about it. And so we've got some work to do to get to the point where business will become more viable to be able to have a successful business and support yourself with it.
And I think what also makes sense, because as you said, it's a relatively new industry, there aren't any good models out there for us of how to operate a business, a death positive business that we can turn to, or that our society is comfortable with or used to seeing. Because, when I had my own medical practice and ran that as a business, I took a weekend course and learned how doctors do the business of running a medical practice. Everyone accepted the idea that, of course, patients come to see me and they pay money and I get paid for seeing them, and they pay and their insurance company pays. And, I didn't have to educate anyone or explain why or how this was working. It was a model that everyone was used to and understood. And so, as you said, we have so many strikes against this industry because, first of all, it deals with death, and people just don't know what to expect and haven't seen this kind of model before.
Exactly. And yes, we can, as far as the doula industry goes, yes, we can liken ourselves to the birth doula, but really it's apples and oranges. It really is. There's so much about birth that's very different than the death process, and the mentality around a death process and the denial and the fact that it's usually a very sad time. Winding down a life is very different than welcoming a new life into the world. And so the practical setting up your practice is different than birth doulas. We might share the word doula, and it might mean, helper, female helper, assistant, that kind of thing. But really, that's where it ends. And so what I suggest my students do is interview other doulas And also take advantage of their trainers. If they have been successful doulas themselves, get and be part of their mentoring program to learn about how to structure your practice. And while you're doing that, take a course like my course or Inelda, but I have a course also about, it's called Kickstart Your Death Positive Business. And I go through not so much the practice development piece. Mine is more the nuts and bolts business skill set that you need. And I think that, everybody needs that. Even if you've come from another industry where you owned your own business, I still think that taking a death positive industry specific business course would be well worth it and will give you a different perspective on things.
And do you have a sense, Kimberly, of what are the most important things that death doulas need to learn, just from the top of your head, about creating a business? Is there something that stands out for you?
Absolutely. Besides the mindset shift that I think is the number one thing, start working on that mindset shift. The second thing would be how to position yourself and to talk about the services that you offer in a way that people get it. And that just comes with practice. And then really and truly, the nuts and bolts of everything is going to be to follow up, follow up, follow up. So when you're out there, dropping in at hospices, referral sources, hospices, doctors' offices, that kind of thing, you're talking to discharge planners, you need to learn to stay top of mind and to build their trust. And the only way to do that is to consistently reach out to them and stay in touch with them. And I'm not talking once a month. I'm talking weekly. And so being able to carve out chunks of time where you can be on the road in your community, meet with, churches, pastors, people that are in your target rich environment, which is they come in contact with your perfect client. And then you need to stay top of mind with them so that they're not like, oh yeah, this person in my parish was just diagnosed and I know they could really use the help. They have no family in this area. What was the name of that person that was coming by that could help? You want to go, oh yeah, that would be perfect for Kimberly, or that would be perfect for Dr. Wyatt. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So the follow-up is key. That's key. And consistent follow-up, whether you feel like you're getting anywhere with them or not. You need to continue to follow up until they tell you, don't come back. We don't want to hear from you, which hopefully won't happen. But you just need to be consistent. And that's the biggest thing that I'm seeing besides the mindset shift that people are struggling with, is they think that they're just going to go out there. And if they don't get an immediate positive response and a referral, they don't keep following up. And that's the number one mistake.
And that's really consistent with something I heard on a different podcast, which was more of a business podcast, was that when you're introducing something that's new to people, they have to be exposed to it or to hear about it at least 7 times before they will be open enough to actually accept it and to remember it and consider it. So that's a lot of follow-up. That's 7 times you need to show up in front of the same discharge planner at the hospital, or, the same.
And that's just to get their mind open, like they're starting to grasp what you do. That doesn't mean they fully get it yet.
Yeah.
And I also like to say that you think of it like this. You need to build the know, that's KNOW, the know, like, trust factor. They have to know you, like you, and trust you to give you referrals or to bring you in for their family. So what do we need to put in place in your business? What types of follow-up materials? Not just a pamphlet. They need to get, a Starbucks gift card. They need to, the know, like, trust factor needs to be built. And so it's not just throwing stuff out there willy-nilly. You need to come up with a plan and use it consistently.
Hmm.
And that's key.
And so it makes sense that all of this type of work, educating the public and doing follow-up and just talking to them about your services, does not generate any income at the time you're doing it. So that's why I understand you're telling people keep your day job and do this type of outreach on the side until you are starting to see a steady stream perhaps of referrals coming to you.
Exactly. And that's where we're falling down as an industry right now. The people that are struggling don't understand that. They're thinking, I'll go meet with one or two people this week, and that's not going to get you where you want to go if you're of the mindset that you want to make this a business. If you're wanting to do it in more of a volunteer or a spiritual practice where there is no charge and you can do it, then maybe you don't need to follow up as much, but you still need to be able to get your name out there. Whether you want to make money doing this or not, and you're wanting to serve in this way, you need to find a vehicle to get referrals coming to you, no matter what. And the only way to do that is to follow up consistently and to have a consistent plan and not reinvent the wheel every week that you're out there. Develop the plan for all 7 touches and then just plug them into wherever they are. On visit 2, they get such and such. On visit 3, they get such and such, and just do it consistently so that you're not having to think about it every week. You build it once and then plug the contacts into them as you meet them into the steps.
Yeah, that really makes sense. So that you're not trying to rethink, oh, how do I connect with these people now? This time, what 7 things can I do with them? You already have it in your head. This is my outreach, and this is how I go about it, and this is how I educate them and what I tell them step by step as I keep returning to give them information.
Right, exactly.
Well, I can see where, on the one hand, we're all aware that there's a huge need for the services of end-of-life doulas and home funeral guides, and it's only growing as baby boomers get older and older. So as we look at the population out there, it seems like a no-brainer. Wow, all these people need these services. If we just go out there and put out a shingle and let people know this is what we're doing, it seems like there should be plenty of people who would come to us and want our services. And yet I think we're not taking into account what you said. It's still a taboo topic. And that is a huge obstacle, huge wall between the people who need our services actually connecting with us.
Exactly. And remember, even just what is it now? They say that hospice generally is actually called in the last 2 weeks of somebody's life.
Mm-hmm.
So hospice has been pretty mainstream for a couple of decades now, at least. And so if they're still educating the public and referral sources and families about what hospice can do, and then I don't want to say we're behind hospice, but we are, because they really have been the front runner in mainstreaming and getting services in place for the dying. And then we're coming in and backfilling and trying to help support them too, as well as our clients, so that everybody feels like the dying are getting served at the highest level. So our education is going to help hospice along, as well as our own businesses, and however we manifest that business, whether it's a volunteer-basis business or it's a, compassionate capitalism-based business.
Mm-hmm. And even if we decide to be volunteers, it makes sense to me that there's still some pieces of business management, some skills that we might need to have if we want to be effective as volunteers.
Absolutely. So things like understanding public relations, how to get the attention of the media in your area, how to network, how to ask for a referral, how to put together your elevator pitch so that people understand what you're talking about when you first introduce yourself and you capture the spirit of what you're wanting to convey. All of those are business building principles, whether you're going to do volunteer based end of life work or not. Having a website, what should go on a website, because there's different kinds of websites out there and most people don't know that. Having a social media presence, how to optimize your profile so that you're attracting the people that would be referral sources for you. All those are business building things, whether or not you're going to quote unquote make money from it or not, that would behoove you to learn about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one thing that I would say I always struggle with is figuring out the right language to use so that I don't scare people away. The moment I open my mouth and try to tell them what I do, which has happened to me over and over again as a hospice doctor, walking up to someone at a social event and telling them that.
Okay.
And
Oh,
so
yes.
I have found that to be a tricky part of working in the death positive movement is exactly the words we put together and how we say them to tell people about what it is we do.
Exactly. And again, I'm going to liken that to the virtual assistant term. Think about this, back in the 90s, late 90s, virtual assistant, like we were all still on AOL dial up. Okay. Like we barely even had, DSL back then as far as internet, and you come up and you go, oh, what do you do? I'm a virtual assistant. And they just kind of look at you, and so it took years for our industry to figure out what words we need to put together so that people don't give us that deer in the headlight look when we describe what we do. And so, as much as we're all very excited about this industry taking off and we see the need and we're so passionate about it, we're still in a learning curve as an industry. How do we communicate this out into the world where people don't just shut down? And that takes time. It takes time. But unless we're moving forward and learning how to do it and putting ourselves out there, we're not going to get the feedback from the public that we need to learn how to communicate. We can sit behind our keyboards and pontificate in Facebook groups all day long. But if we're not out there talking to the public and getting their feedback about what we're saying, we're not going to grow the industry. We need more people out there talking about this stuff.
It's so true. And that's really how we keep our sights on, as you said, the long view, that we know that we are trying to help this death positive movement grow. And we're trying to help it grow in a positive way to make it viable and sustainable in our communities. So any work that any of us do right now is just part of that learning curve. We're gathering information, or we're learning what works and doesn't work. And when we can share that with each other and keep growing, we're helping the overall movement to keep moving forward.
Exactly. And I think that sums it up really well. And the only other thing for me on that personally is I do believe in having great, frank discussions about things. I am concerned in our industry because it is such a sensitive subject that I'm seeing a lot of judgment and a lot of I don't know how to explain it, a lot of not just judgment, but really challenging conversations full of everybody thinking that their way is the right way. And it hurts me because what I see is something that could be helping to move the industry forward is it's almost like we're eating our own. And it hurts my heart. And I hope that we can bring the same openness to each other even if we disagree on how the quote unquote business is going to be built, or we don't agree or whatever, that we keep the same openness that we come to our clients with in honoring their cultural practices or their religious practices or their personal death plan, whether we agree with it or not. I'm hoping that we can see that we can actually destroy our own industry from the inside out if we don't watch the judgment.
Mm. And in a previous episode I talked about death's big tent, and that on the one end, we all fit underneath this big tent that death offers us. And I talked a lot about patients and their approach to death and dying and what they would want and how we have to honor all of that. But that applies to all of us doing the work as well. We have to make room for everyone who's called to the work. Everyone has a reason to be here doing the work on their path in their way. And we have to allow them that. We have to be open enough to say, you do your thing, you do it your way. And I'm going to just focus on my way. I'll do what I feel in my heart is the right thing for me. But I'm not going to try and stop you or blame you or judge you because you're doing it differently.
Exactly. And that's what I mean. And that's where I see the difference being when I was part of the beginning of the virtual assistant industry. There was none of that. And what's hurting my heart is so much right now. It feels like the very people that are supposed to be showing so much love and attention and openness are hurting their own. And we could actually be just learning from each other, loving each other along and watching and saying, wow, go for it. I believe if that's your path, then I bless you on your path. Go for it. Let me know if there's any way I can help you. You know what I mean? And I'm really hoping that we see a bit of a turnaround in that attitude.
Mm-hmm.
It's a warning right now. I'm seeing so much of it now that I'm actually concerned.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. If we want to make inroads in our communities and how people are cared for at the end of life and after death, we have to get our own house in order first. And we can't be undermining each other or judging each other. We just each need to focus on our own path and our own work as we go along.
Yep, exactly. I'm in agreement. I liken it to a diamond, and a diamond doesn't just have one facet. What makes that diamond sparkle is all the different facets of that diamond that are chiseled. And that's what brings the brilliance of the diamond out. If it was just a flat piece of stone, then it wouldn't have the brilliance. And that's what we are. We're all just different facets of this diamond. And we wouldn't be as brilliant and we wouldn't shine so bright in the universe if we were just a flat piece of stone. So let's quit trying to mold each other into what we all think we should be doing and placing so much judgment on each other. Let's lift each other up and be those bright, shining facets of our diamond.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sounds a lot better to me.
Yeah, I love that idea. And Kimberly, you mentioned that you have a course called Kickstart Your Death Positive Business. Would you tell us a little bit about what that course is like?
I sure do. It's, again, like you said, Kickstart Your Death Positive Business. And it's at or you can go to death-positivebusiness.com. And really, it's an 8-week course that's sent to you by email that goes over the basic business building principles and some of the mindset shifts that you need to work on, like the employee versus the entrepreneur mindset. I go over the different business entities and the pros and cons of each so that you can make an informed decision on how to actually set up your business legally. Choosing the best type of website that's suited for you, the type based on your practice and what you want to do. Because there's, like I said before, there's different types of websites. We go over how to create effective print marketing and how to use them to build your business. Same with social media marketing, trade show networking, pretty much everything that you would need in a fundamental business course. The twist on it is that I am coaching death positive business owners. So I take all of that into account.
Hmm.
And
So that sounds really good for someone who's just getting started. And it sounds like it would help people get started from the ground up in the right way, like making the best kind of decisions and help them avoid wasting time, perhaps.
exactly,
Um,
exactly. As well as, I've also heard, like you have, that people have come into this industry and they have had to go back to work, and they were so frustrated that they end up not not doing it even as a part-time thing, because they were just so crushed that their dream was crushed. And what I have said is that taking this course, even while you're in the middle of going through your certification, whatever you're doing to get certified, can actually help you decide. Number one, the skill set that I'm teaching is great to have no matter what you do, because it's basic business stuff. And it is, in what I've heard from people, from 3 of my students, have been, they ended up deciding not to go the way of owning a business, a for-profit business, and decided to do it volunteer wise only, because once they really realized what it takes to run a business, they decided it wasn't for them. That they would rather stay an employee somewhere to make money and then do this on the side as a volunteer type of. And they're like, you saved me. Yeah, your course was $397, but you saved me thousands of dollars in trying to build a business, not knowing what I was doing and realizing it wasn't for me. So, I suggest that you kind of take a look at it on either side, because it can help you, in either direction.
mhm. And then what if someone is already on their way? Maybe they've already put some things in motion and have a website. Do you work with people individually to fix specific problems they might be having with their business?
I absolutely do. I do a lot of coaching, one-on-one or group coaching. And I have several people that are interested in me putting together a group coaching model, like a mastermind, and specific coaching to there, where they can open up, get some real nuts and bolts advice and accountability to the group and to me to keep moving forward if that's what they want to do. And then one-on-one coaching also. I also offer a few different done for you packages where we can audit what you already have and optimize if you have things already in place. And if you don't, like if you don't have a follow-up system in place, then we can get that hammered out for you, all the marketing collateral, your messaging, and you can go to town with it once we get it all developed for you.
Hmm. I can see this. This is a huge benefit. I can imagine someone who just finished a certification training as an end-of-life doula or a home funeral guide and comes out idealistic and excited and eager to step out into the world and have clients, patients, and families to help, and then have absolutely no idea what to do next. And so it seems
Exactly.
your course would be a great adjunct to a lot of the certification trainings that are out there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then getting that specific help for yours. So say you've been out there and you've been trying. I want to hear about that. And then I'll say, okay, we need to tweak this, this, and this. And you're probably going to see an increase in referrals, or you're going to make more headway with your referral sources, because a lot of it's messaging. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah. I've definitely found that that's a huge obstacle to overcome, the messaging, and it's important to get someone else's feedback, because the words that we think in our own heads are perfectly understandable. We need someone else to say, nope, I have no idea what you're talking about.
exactly, exactly. And also to remember that what you like, because you come from this industry, and what you respond to is not going to be what the general public is going to respond to. We have to talk in the general public's language, not our own language. So all the euphemisms and things that the terms that we've coined, and even like death positive business, people look at me and go, what is a death positive business? You know what I mean? So so that's the term of my URL for my website was definitely very specific to our industry. There's no way I could market that out in the general public. It's very niche specific. Mm-hmm. And so I really work a lot with people with their terminology and what they're saying out there. And I'm not saying we're dumbing it down. It's not dumbing it. It's creating a safe place for people to understand what we're doing.
Yes.
Get it.
And I recently read, this was a scientific study where they did MRI scans on people's brains and found out that about 35% of people that they studied, if you confront them with their own death and present their own death to them, their brain literally shuts down. It refuses to receive that information. They're able to hear about death in a more abstract sense, to talk about death in general or to talk about planning for the end of life. But if you directly confront them and say, you are going to die, the brain shuts down. So this is like a third of the people out there that we're going to be approaching, wanting to work with them, that we have to be sensitive to the fact that sometimes a very direct and confrontational approach is not the right thing for
absolutely
a very large group of people.
Yep, exactly. And to understand that, I think that's just part of the human condition. Not everybody's wired to be able to accept that. And in that way, in that very blunt, conversational way, it's and to be sensitive to that fact.
Yeah, definitely. So, Kimberly, if someone listening is interested in learning more about your course or in finding out about doing some coaching with you, how do they go about connecting with you?
Sure. Well, you can go to my website, death-positivebusiness.com, and that is just showing the course right now. We're in the middle of revamping my website because I've just added all these done from you packages in the last month or so. And so if you're interested in coaching with me or anything like that, why don't you email me? My email address is kimberly@thewiseassistant.com. All one word, thewiseassistant.com.
All right. And I'll put that email address in the show notes for this episode, which will be at EOLUpodcast.com. And then I did want to say, I know, Kimberly, that you have done coaching with some teachers that probably everyone listening has heard of or knows, that this isn't like something that, you're just creating right now in the moment, that you've been doing it for a while and you have actually been part of the success of some teachers out there who are teaching lots and lots of students and making a difference in the world. And so I just wanted to give you praise for that, so everyone knows that you have tremendous credibility in this field.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, you'll see them on that website. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful learning time for everybody, and to really see the back end and get some very in-depth work done to move this industry forward. I've been very, very blessed.
Yeah, so even the people that we see as being quite successful in what they're doing right now didn't necessarily come to this work with the business skills that they needed to create that success. They needed help also. So it makes sense that all of us can use some of this advice and information.
Absolutely. I agree. Even me. I mean, I still have a business coach. I've been doing this for years, and I never have a year in my life where I am not coaching with somebody, because I always need to be learning.
Yeah. And it makes sense that there's always something new to learn. And especially from every experience that you have, teaches you something, and it's really helpful to have a mentor who can show you how to interpret this experience and how to use it to really grow.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I'm so glad we had this conversation. I have to admit, I had fears within myself, like, what will people think if I'm talking about business? Like, because I've
Hmm.
never really emphasized this or talked about it before, but I believe it's very important, and we all need to take a look at that. And I, I think that you're doing really good work and helping so many people to to have a more viable business so that they can take care of more people and spread their message farther and do more good in the death positive movement.
Absolutely. That's all I want. Like I said, whether they choose to do a for profit model or a volunteer type of model, a lot of the skill set they still need to have. So I honor everybody on their path for all the great work, everybody out there, including yourself. Karen, you're doing amazing work with your podcast and your speaking. Um, I'm in awe of how far we've come in such a short period of time, really.
So true, so true. And the fact is, we can all use as many tools as we can get. And so, adding a few business tools might take away some of the stress that we're under because we'll just learn better ways of doing some of the things that we're trying to do to keep our work going.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, very good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Kimberly. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
You too.
Goodbye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Kimberly. I just wanted to mention once again the idea of death's big tent, which I did a whole podcast episode on. But the fact that here, as we're caring for people at the end of life, there's really room for everything. And we have to make sure that we are able to include a diverse array of business models and plans for how we care for people at the end of life. And I just wanted to emphasize that point again, that I really think as we're looking toward how can we move into the future, how can we make sure that people can get care, reasonable, good care at the end of life, we have to consider all of the options that are available to us and support all of the people who are trying to do this work in whatever way they're trying to bring it into the world. So that's my feeling around that. And I wanted to mention too, so if you enjoy this podcast, I hope you'll share it with other people who might benefit from listening in. You can also support the podcast by leaving a review wherever you happen to listen to episodes here. And you can also become a supporter on Patreon at patreon.com/EOLU if you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to keep the podcast on the air. So until next week, remember we're here for love. So face your fear, be ready for whatever life brings your way, and love each and every moment of your life. Bye-bye.